That would be whining.
I don't want the candy dish. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay.
It's live.
All right. I guess they're ready, so.
Okay, Madam Mayor and members of the Basalt Council, we have a work session here tonight on pursuing the CDC property. This has been discussed, obviously you can't make a decision in a work session, but this has been discussed during councilor comments two previous times. And I thought it was a good idea for you all to have some conversation with me and staff about what you want to do, what your thoughts are, and so on and so forth. In front of you, and I apologize for the late delivery of this, is we'll call it a 3-page email that includes information from me and Bruce Kimmel from Ehlers about a financial analysis related to this purchase, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Well, maybe we'll talk about that right now. One of the things that at a staff level Judy and I discussed was determining where the money might come from to make an outright purchase of this property. In discussions with some counselors, there were other options such as maybe a short-term loan, other types of financing provisions for the property. As a result of those conversations, Judy and I had a conversation with Mr. Kimmel and outlined all of the points that are included in this memorandum. And I'll ask Judy to chime in as is appropriate. But we were going to look at kind of a general fund projection from 2017 to 2026 with actuals, so we could get an idea what the baseline government operations looks like. That would include looking at projections of sales tax revenues and other, which is obviously our primary source, but other forms of revenues to perhaps replenish our reserves or the general fund or other funds if they were used for making a purchase. And the details of that kind of, those items are listed here. Judy, do you want to kind of run through those in a broad sense?
Right, so we're gonna grow our personnel, and then our operations, which are your street maintenance, and, depending on what PD looks like, whether that's, adding another officer, we just added one, so if that's in the 3rd to 4th year, what that looks like. But then when we were, discussing it with Bruce, I would like a little bit of feedback from you guys. So if we went below the 33%, what would be your recommendation for how long and kind of what your comfort level with that is, so that we know, how to address that, and then what we could use for a debt service if we went after short-term funding with Bruce.
Part of our thinking about having Ehlers do this work was one that after I looked at some of the history about this property and all the things that have taken place on there, I felt it was a little more complex than we first thought. Second, we felt it was best if we had a third-party look at this so people didn't feel like there was any bias from the staff in this analysis. And third, Ehlers and Bruce Kimmel in particular have done work on this property, have looked at the finances in the past, they're familiar with it, and they are professional and can, we think, can put together an excellent report for you. Okay, so that's our thinking there. In terms of the CDC property, there are several options that I'll just kind of run through. They're fairly obvious. One is wait until the owner processes an application with the town and go from there. Two would be the town pursues purchase of the property in some form or fashion. Or three, the property sells to another buyer and that buyer pursues some kind of application with the town or something else. There may be some hybrids, other things out there, but we could spend all day playing what ifs. I think if you see some other options in there you would like to relay to the staff, we'd be happy to consider those or include those in the overall mix. If the town decides to pursue the purchase, one, we talked about retaining Ellers to complete the analysis on the property and the dollars available, and be realistic and conservative with those numbers. Because it would be a concern to pull our available cash down to a low level, and there would be consequences of doing that in terms of doing other things until those funds were brought back up to some acceptable or desirable level. Two, if the town were to purchase the property, I would think it would include some type of subdivision of the land into, 2 or more parcels. And the thinking behind that is, one, a portion we understand would be used for park purposes. So with our available funding, for example, post money could be used for park purchases, but you wouldn't use post money to purchase a portion of the property that might be used for future development, because there's restrictions on that. So creating 2 or more parcels, some of which could be sold to recoup some of our investment in that property. Next thing that would be considered on the property would be applying some type of zoning, whether that's CSC or some other applicable zoning that would be appropriate. Could be PUD, don't know. That we're looking for direction from you all. And then eventually, this would not be immediately, there would likely be some type of, at least on the park portion of the property, some type of development plan for that. And I would encourage the town to look at pursuing GOCO funds. They're available for planning purposes, and they're available for development purposes on that site. There would be matching funds associated with that, and I believe GOCO's matching funds is around 30%. The more you match, the more likely it is you would get money. But that's another way to help leverage town dollars to end up with a final product on that site. And with that, that's kind of my spiel on the options that you have put forth, or some of you have put forth. Judy, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, and we also wanted to ask for some direction when we did, so right now there's the taxable bonds and the non-taxable bonds. And if part of that, what Davis was describing, and we talked about this a little bit in the finance committee meeting, but there will be the part that will be developed, and we have always said that we would put part of that money back and pay off those taxable bonds. And so just a clear definition of what would go back to the general fund, and then what would pay down the taxable bonds. And so just to remember, we've got 2 separate pieces. I think the part that's gonna be a park, and you've got post money, that has to be thought of very separately than the development piece. And we have to be careful we don't do Tabor violations. So we just need to be very clear on whatever is the development piece of how we fund that, and then what kind of payback, how long we're okay with having below 33% in our reserves.
And that would be part of Mr. Eller's, Mr. Kimmel's,
I know, everyone does that.
something like that.
Okay, thanks, Davis and Judy. We're having this discussion because in an earlier meeting, meeting before last, Bernie had expressed an opinion that maybe we should look at buying this whole parcel. And his reasoning, and I have talked to him many times since, his disclosure is that we could possibly move this whole thing along much, much faster if we were to purchase the whole parcel, subdivide it, zone it, and kick back the development side to a developer in a much simpler format. The reason that we are having this conversation is this sort of got on the street as if it were happening and on horses galloping away. And in reality, we have not had a public conversation about this, and we have not decided as a council if we want to pursue looking at purchase options, whether it be, cash or short-term loan or seller carry or anything. We have not had the conversation at all. So I think what we want to do at this point is just talk about each individually, if you believe that we should pursue a purchase option that does not involve going to the voters and does not involve any kind of tax increase. So, Bernie, I think I might just ask you to go first since you started this.
Well, I don't want to go first.
Okay, you don't have
because
to. You don't have to.
I threw out the idea, and I think the idea of this meeting is to let the council, having heard my basic concept, which is somewhat generalized, I would rather hear from other council members first, and they may have questions of me. I'll be glad to answer any questions, and then I would actually prefer to go last so that they can discuss it.
Okay.
But if there's any questions that you want me to clarify first, sure.
Oh, and also just to say that some of Judy's questions and maybe even some of Davis's questions are, I think, getting the cart way before the horse when we haven't decided if we want to go down that road yet as a group. So whoever
I'll
wants, go, Mark.
Well, my opinion is, I think CDC should step up to the plate a little bit here, and they haven't. We brought their property up out of the floodplain, got rid of the trailers, put utilities in, and still haven't received anything from those guys. So the only thing I would support would be possibly the subdivision, and we buy half of it, the park part, and they can deal with their part. I thought we had already zoned it C,
CSC.
yeah,
The zoning exists, but it has not been applied to that property. Right
Okay.
now, it's,
still trailer park,
C2 PUD.
okay. But we've got a lot of infrastructure stuff, snow plows to buy. Our shop is in disrepair. I just think there's other things that we could be spending this money on more viably. And perhaps this would make CDC step up to the plate and, go after some developers and propose some plans. They're just sitting on our coattails and we're doing all the work.
So the gist of that is that you'd be okay with buying half.
Half of it.
Okay.
We could use first money and
Right.
Pitkin County and Eagle County pledges, and I think we'd be in good shape, but not the whole thing.
Others? Katie?
Well, I have not read this memo. It's 3 pages long of bullet points. So it's really hard to fully comment on what's being asked this evening in depth. I think that Mark makes some pretty valid points. I would be concerned about our diligence about reaching our goal of 33%, and how this would impact that and what we would have to forego. I do also look at that park parcel as, the word that continues to come up is that it's a legacy parcel, and that it's a special parcel, and so special considerations need to be made for that. But I would like time to digest this memo. I think it's a good, it would be good information to have. I guess I couldn't, 3 pages of Bruce Eller's analysis can only help us. But in this, would he contemplate both the analysis of the entire parcel and, as Mark just described, only half of the parcel? Or is that just like so easy to do that we don't even need Bruce to look at that?
Bruce's analysis, to the extent that the property might be purchased and subdivided and portions sold, that would be part of his analysis on how the town would recoup a portion of its funding. If it is simply CDC comes forward, processes an application, and the town, at some time after that subdivision and development takes place, we bought a piece of property, we didn't really ask for that. We were asking more, if the town were to pursue purchase of the entire property, and then it was in the town's hands, and we did all the subdivision and zoning and sales somehow, that's what his bullet points are all about. In a nutshell, all those bullet points that, I apologize for you getting them just now, but we got them just the other day. They're all directed at, do we have the funds? Where would those funds come from? If we spent them and we drew reserves down and post money was used, over what period of time would those funds be replenished based on current cash flow and projected cash flow, and so on and so forth. So all that detail is more focused on that, because I think I told you a while, 2 meetings ago perhaps, that we thought we would do that internally, and then after looking at it, it was better to let the pros do it.
It's just we're trying to define a scope of service, so we don't have another consultant that is, just goes forever that we don't know. And that's a little bit of what we need for you to give us back, is we're trying to help Bruce put together a scope so we know what you guys would like to see.
Got it, okay.
To also expand on the conversation here just a little bit, in terms of buying half the property from CDC, that would be dependent upon their willingness to do that. That would be dependent upon CDC pursuing at least a subdivision application on that property. That's not an automatic thing. That's involves negotiation and working with the owner of the property, because it's one piece and they own it.
Right, and we have asked in the past to be sold just the one half, and that hasn't been an option. So, but not to say, couldn't ask again. But I think my takeaway from what Bertie was suggesting is, and what I think I've talked mostly to Davis about is, if we get a couple, 3 alternatives of how could we buy this thing, for me, what that does is gets this thing moving so that we can immediately subdivide, immediately zone, and then a developer, whether it's the current interested party or somebody else, can move on it. And granted, we don't want to rush into something, but it's been a couple of years, so it's barely considered rushing. And it just doesn't seem like it's moving on its own, and they haven't been willing to sell half, and there's never been an application submitted, and the current interested developer is very transparent and has clearly stated he wants a hotel condo and he wants the public to pay a couple $1 million for parking. So if that's the case, we haven't seen that application, but that's what he's been saying. So, just to move it forward, so that the guy doesn't have to buy a bunch of property that he's not using. For us to buy it, sell him what he wants, have it subdivided. Ma'am, you have words in your mind?
I will share with the caveat that as well, I was unclear coming into this work session exactly what we were going to be discussing, so my thoughts are not fully cohesive.
Can I just interrupt 1 second?
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of all kinds of direction here, but what we've been talking about is the question in front of us is, do we want to hire Ellers to bring back a couple, 3 of viable alternative ways to buy the parcel? That was the question, so.
So, to directly answer the question, and I did have the opportunity to read through the proposal, I do feel that it is a valid use of roughly $7,500 for the study, as part of our due diligence as a town to consider every angle of how to solve I don't want to call it a problem, but how to solve a puzzle. And it seems like an intelligent action to go forth on. So I do agree with that. And I will provide my consent and suggest. What
my priority and that of what I hear from many citizens is to have a confirmation, a guarantee that the park parcel, the Big V, will maintain as a park. And that is not an assurance that we have heard anywhere yet. There have been no proposals. We can keep calling it the park parcel, but there's no guarantee that it is a park parcel, and that's very concerning. And that is the one thing that all of the, a majority of all of the visions want and see at that place. And so that is what I want to ensure occurs. And that's why I have been consistent through the process of requesting bifurcation of from CDC so that the town can just straight out purchase the Big V. I am aware that the Big V is a vital vision piece for future development, or from the developer, or from the landowner's perspective, that it is the corner parcel, and that it is a viable parking area for off-street parking. And that is what my greatest fear is, that I repeat around and around, and I have heard this from an appraiser, that the reality, if a development around 55,000 square feet is built on the developable portion, that will relate to 150 parking spots. Where are 150 parking spots going to go? If the taxpayers are not interested in spending an exorbitant amount of money for underground parking, then that parking needs to go somewhere, and the viable, easiest, least expensive place for it to go is in the Big V in the park. And there's no assurance that it's going to be a parking lot or a park. They both have the same four-letter word in them, park, right? There is that correlation, but we need some sort of assurance, and that's where it seems like appropriate due diligence to do is to look at all of our financing options to include bifurcation and the entirety, selling it, etc. I do agree that it's important for the town to maintain our 33% in reserves. We've worked very hard to get there. It's great to know that there are still partnerships out there. And we are an intelligent group, and I believe that we can get there, and I trust, and that's what I want, and that's what everyone in this community wants, is to solve the puzzle.
Well, as I said before, Bernie and I talked about this. I totally understand where Bernie's coming from. This is a big challenge. It's been sitting there forever. We got to deal with it at some point. I also think CDC was well-intentioned in the first place, and it would be good to get them off the hook for this property. So there's all kinds of reasons to pursue Bernie's option. My concern is, one, on this buy half thing, that wasn't on the table before. I doubt it's on the table again, so I don't really see that as an option. My concern primarily is if the town chooses to spend a bunch of money in this particular place, we forego the ability to spend that money in all these other different areas that everyone cares about, whether it's dealing with downtown parking, or buffing out trails through town, or fixing sidewalks, or doing childcare or housing or whatever. And I have a whole bunch of those. I mean, the Public Works building, it goes on and on. A lot of those concerns. So when Bruce Kimmel says we can lay out as many potential capital projects as make sense and then objectively demonstrate the town's scarcity of fund balances available to fund those projects, I don't need a study to tell me that we need a lot of money to fund a lot of important projects. So my concern is, why make that the only source of attention with town funds? I think the path forward ought to be hear from the developer with a proposal, and if the council says, I don't like it, then we move on to the next step. But I don't think we need to do the analysis in advance because of my previous concerns. So that's where I'm coming from. Oh, one last thing. I think the idea that chunk will be park to your, the Big V park, whether you think that's good urban planning or not, which I don't particularly think it is, I think there's so much council and political will that be park in some capacity. And I think we'll see that protected, and I'd support protecting that. So to me, it's not at risk of being a parking lot. I would oppose that.
Thanks, Auden.
Okay, let's address the financial aspect first, and keeping our policies. And I sort of was the one who led the charge to rebalance the budget to get out of deficit spending, which we've been in a pattern of the town of deficit spending for 4 or 5 years, to where we spent our fund balances down to way less than half of what our reserves, what our policy says, 105 says they should be. But and we got them back. And we are now running a very tight ship. We are in balance. That same exact policy says that these fund reserves may be borrowed upon for a unique opportunity. Whether you're for or against the park, I can hardly think of anybody who doesn't think doing something with that land that is our front porch, that welcomes people over the bridge, that is iconic and gives the essence of the town to visitor, is anything other than a unique opportunity. So we could stay within our fiscal policy, borrow the money, either pay it back from cash flow or issue short-term obligations for repayment within 3 to 5 years without increasing anybody's property taxes. No new taxes would be levied on the city or its inhabitants. I think this is a winning combination, but I am not a municipal finance expert. Bruce Kimmel is our municipal finance expert. The thing we're looking at today is, do we give him the nod to come and give an objective financial analysis to these different opportunities? Maybe this is not as doable as I seem to think it is. I have an open mind. I don't know what Bruce Kimmel's analysis will come back with. I think we owe it to good management and the people of the town to engage Bruce to do this level of analysis, and I believe it is one more step in our financial responsibility and our financial reporting improvement. We did not have a capital improvement plan. Within the last year, we developed a capital improvement plan. We did not have a written procurement plan. Within the last year, we adopted a written procurement plan. Having a financial analysis of various different capital projects is nothing but a benefit in our and future councils making responsible fiscal decisions about how we use the money. How we use the money is a political discussion, and I don't know the risk of legal liability, of conflict. That's where I am.
Okay, so I don't know, I mean, everybody's pretty much said where they are, and Judy has a lot of questions, and I'm not sure that we can answer those questions. You want to try them one at a time, you or Davis, if you feel like you need
And those questions
some direction
Are-
from us about.
hire Ellers
Okay,
Or-
yes.
is
We
one.
can't vote about that, but that's the question,
That's an action item.
right?
Right, that'd be an action item that if, when you're done with your work session, we have a slot on the agenda, so you can have that discussion. And then, in terms of the specifics of Ellers, there's a bunch of bullet points, but they're kind of practical bullet points, you know. How would this all work? Where would the money come from? What are the restrictions on use of funds? How would the money be paid back? You know, through subdivision, through cash flow, through a combination of those things. This was our first shot at having a conversation with Bruce in terms of putting some kind of a proposal together and getting some kind of estimated cost for doing that work.
Well, I'm with Bernie, and I think that our only question, and we can't answer it now until we're out of executive session, is do we want to ask?
Work session, not executive
I'm
session.
sorry, work session. Those things that end with session, one of those things, is to decide whether or not we want to go through this hoop to look at 2 or 3 options for, purchase of this. And like Bernie says, if the option doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But I think that we have, really stumbled around with this for so very long, and it would be nice to ensure that there is a development parcel that cannot be made a park because it's zoned and subdivided, because I think there's fear on the one side that that is a possibility, that it would all be park. And I think that, on the other side, I think that the people who want to be sure that there is half park will be insured of that. So I think we need to take this step to go further, but, and I'm not sure there's any other questions we can answer until we do that.
For the scenarios that you'd like to see, none of them include what Mark suggested, is to buy the park parcel only.
Well, I think that would just be sort of a given, like Mark or somebody said. If we know what the story is, 3 options for buying the whole thing, I'm not sure that, I mean, we know that the option to buy the whole thing is there. The landowner has said that they are willing to sell the land at the price that they listed, that we referred to the ballot. So we know that option's there. I think we'd just be asking for, pie in the sky to ask about buying half of it, because it's not an option. Yeah, Jen?
So I think what's interesting is to think of this and for the public to think of this beyond the CDC parcel, and look at it as a 5-year CIP, hand in glove, they go together, because there are these other large other fiscal projects that we have, such as the building a recreation department. We bumped up against that last session and the last meeting and the meeting before, where we had to come up with $36,000 that was not in the budget for rent. And so this is an exercise in looking at what Bruce goes into for a version that changes the anticipated timing of future capital projects, to show how other projects could get done once funding balances are restored to X level. And that just does not relate to the RFCDC parcel. That relates to the concept of the recreation, as well as the public works building. And so we're not limited to just one scenario, but what I will reflect in what has been said by the public is they are not interested in increasing the taxes and a future debt issuance that needs to go to the voters. And so I feel that that is a version that we don't need to spend money on, because that already went to the ballot and it was shut down. So that's my input on if we're looking at various versions of what Bruce can do.
Yeah, Davis.
I might add that, as we noted to you, 2 meetings ago or longer, that staff had met with Rob Pugh and Jim DeFrancia and talked to them. You know, we've had a couple work sessions, and they were looking for feedback, and you gave them the feedback. And we had talked to them about bringing forward an application. And then during that interim time frame, that's when Bernie's proposal came forward about acquisition. So, and the next day I met with them just to say, look, this came up, this is another option, and, you know, you can pursue your development proposal with the town, or maybe the town comes up with a plan to buy the property. So I don't know what the current status is, but I do know that Art Base has been having communications with those folks about trying to gift or acquire a portion of that property for Art Base. So that's going on as well, and I don't know the details other than Jenna sent me an email and explained that. So there's a couple things happening, there's a couple moving parts.
Okay, so let me just run this by council. We're not gonna vote, but The options that come to mind for Ellers to look at is purchase with cash, purchase with short-term debt, not a tax increase, not a voter question. And I think because I heard at least two people say it, we need to somehow throw in there buy half the parcel.
Well, if they're talking to the art base for the developable piece, that's kind of where I'm going with that half.
A portion of it anyway.
And if they, give them that portion, that would be that much less that we would have to pay.
So is that another option?
Well, I'm assuming the art base is wanting it donated, and if CDC steps up and says, all right, we'll donate that to you, I don't see that happening, but
Yeah, that's, I think, my understanding, that's part of the conversation, and CDC could not donate or anything, a portion less than the whole without subdividing, so they still have to come through
I
the
think the
process.
town would be willing to pay for the subdivision, whatever it took.
So,
And I do like the general fund projections, 2017 through 2026. That's going to be very valuable for us to be able to use everywhere. With the general fund cash flows.
And when we talked to Bruce Kimmel, we suggested that as he builds this spreadsheet model, if we move forward on this, that he includes some variables such as sales tax projection slots where you can change the number if 2 years out, sales tax doubles, or sales tax goes in half, or those kinds of things. So there would be value and utility of this model for some other things in the future, but it's really directed at where would we get the money if we were to buy that property, and what would be the impacts to post funds, general fund, the bonds, everything that's out there that's all tied together. So there are a number of threads that connect.
And when Bruce and I were visiting, so your forecast, Jen, is done, it's in draft form, but
Okay.
that's the part where we were fairly conservative on sales tax, but I would like to look at what if our retail food category went flat, knowing that there could be a honeymoon period for Carbondale if in fact they do buy. And we saw that here, except for we didn't wanna pay $75,000 for a leakage study, cause it was leaking into our same municipality. But we did see, when Whole Foods first opened, probably about that first 4 to 6 months, it was kind of a honeymoon period, but then, City Market kind of stepped up and redid that first aisle and, with, where the sushi bar is. So, we can make those projections, and Bruce and I have talked, but I think if we do just sales tax, I would like to drill down a little bit more than that, because about 45% of sales tax is retail food. And so movement in one category, any of the other categories, I'm not sure we would fill it, but that one single category could very seriously impact any kind of modeling that we did for a payback.
I very much agree with that, and that did stick out to me. Bruce says, and model will show the town to gauge the impact that certain events, for example, major retail competition, could have on the town's finances. Having been at the tree farm application last night, that's a real threat, and that's something that is our responsibility to be prepared for.
okay. We're basically about done with the work session unless there's a burning desire for any final comments. We take a short break. We will be back to go into regular session. This subject will come up again. We will be in open session. And so it will only be about a half hour from now that we will get to this again. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Friendly reminder to the people in the back, yell mic at us if you can't hear us. All right, thank you. Okay, we are calling this meeting to order at 6:05. And Pam, could we ask for a roll call, please?
Certainly. Auden Schindler.
Here.
Jennifer Riffle. Mark Kittle.
Here.
Katie Schwer.
Here.
Bernie Grauer.
Here.
Gary Tenenbaum. Jackie Whitsitt.
Here. Thanks, Pam.
Welcome.
First, before I forget, we want to thank Grassroots TV for being here and for broadcasting our meeting live. People can view tonight's meeting live and previous council meetings at grassrootstv.org. Our videographer this evening is John Paul Sugata. The mayor's coffee is tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock at Starbucks, and I will buy you coffee if you will come talk to me. Also, we have an introduction tonight. Watkins, could you say your whole name?
Watkins Folk Gray.
Okay, Folkgray. Watkins Folkgray from Routt County, which is Steamboat for those who may not know. And he has been hired in the planning department. And Watkins, is there anything you want to say to this room full of people and the TV at large?
Well, I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to getting to know all of you, and be happy to answer any questions about myself or work if you guys have any.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and I think we'll have plenty of work for you.
Welcome.
Right.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome, thanks for joining our team.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, our first business item is the consent agenda. Is there anything on this agenda that there's questions on there that needs to be pulled off for some reason?
Motion to approve, Mayor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great, thank you. We are going to now ask for council comments, reports, disclosures, and other reports. Does anybody have anything? Auden, you've got the look.
I do, James, if you can just go to that webpage. I just want to flag another small project I want to work on that involves putting these little free libraries in 3 spots in the community, one in Old Town, one in Southside, one in Willits. And these cost about $1,000. It would cost the community about $3K to install these. The library, if you haven't been there recently, they have a lot of great books that are free or cheap, and they've agreed to stock it. And as you walk around our communities, you can stop and take a book out, put a book in. It allows people to engage each other in literature, and it's something that I've seen in other communities throughout the United States. So this is another, kind of like the Gnome Park, or the attempt I'm making to connect alleys in the town or open alleys. It's another way to build community at super limited cost. Davis, it's gonna be on an agenda at a later date, right? And we can discuss it then, but I just wanted people to be aware of the idea.
Okay, thanks.
Others? Jen?
I would like to thank all of the citizens and the staff and fellow counselors for all of your time and investment in interviewing future town manager candidates this last Friday. And that was very educational and promising, and it's very exciting to have a finalist, Mr. Ryan Mahoney, who we are going to be continuing this Friday to have discussions with, and the opportunity for the public to meet him from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at Rocky Mountain Institute this upcoming Friday. And that is an incredible, fantastic, exciting, I'm really excited about this.
Me too.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm not the only one at this table. I think we all are, and as a community, and I invite all of us to consider him with an open mind, and if he chooses to join and we choose to move forward with him, to welcome him with warm embraces and community spirit in mind.
Thanks, Jen. Others? I have a couple of warm and fuzzies as well. I went to the high school, I don't know if it's an honors, but it's scholarship award banquet the other night. What night was that, Daniel? But anyway, it was just happened. And it was really, really exciting to see so many kids who have worked so hard and may not have had an opportunity to move forward with their education, receive scholarships over and over again from all the different businesses in this valley and nonprofits. So that was cool. And then this week was it just yesterday? It was just yesterday was the Earth Day parade where the 500 or 600 elementary school kids parade down here, and then they sing a song that they've been learning. And so that was another wonderful thing. We have a lot of fun and positive things going on here, so I'm happy about that. Our next item is citizen comments for items not on the agenda and items added to the agenda after the deadline, which we don't have any of, I don't believe. So, once again, it's for items that are not on the agenda. If you want to talk about something that is on the agenda, if you could hold your comments until that agenda item comes up, that would be great. And, as usual, we ask that our comments be kept to about 3 minutes. Did you have something? Okay, all right, you had that look.
I know, Tom, if I can pass that so that everyone may have a copy of it. Hi, everyone. For the record, my name is Toni Kronberg, and I want to do a kudos.
You have your notes on the back?
That's okay, because I consolidated them into my outline. So some of you may get my notes from your earlier meeting tonight. Thanks, Tom,
All kinds of notes.
for noticing that. Thank you.
One without notes, I'll just say.
Okay.
Yeah, you're eating into her 3 minutes.
This won't take long at all. But what I wanted to do is I went to Aspen City Council last night, and I thought that Basalt was deserving of a thank you to the Aspen Skiing Company. This past weekend, they had closing day ceremonies, and most of you know that I teach swimming and that for years I worked very hard to get the Snowmass Recreation Center built and the Aspen Recreation Center. That took about 30 years of combined time. But the Aspen Skiing Company actually had 3 hot tubs on the top of Aspen Mountain. And for years, we've always battled do bikinis, Speedos, skis, and ski outfits mix, and they do. But I just wanted to give kudos to the Aspen Skiing Company. There's a few pictures. There was an article that I believe the reporter that's in the audience today that wrote about it, and I want to thank the Aspen Times for covering it, and that maybe one day in the future, Buttermilk could actually add a little water park. But because so many executives, and now that you've got the ski company employees down here, that I just want them to know that those efforts to try something new did not go unnoticed.
Great,
Thank you.
Tony.
Thank
Thanks for coming in. Any other citizens with comments for items that are not on the agenda? Okay, then we will move on to our regular agenda. And our first item is a conversation regarding the CDC property financing analysis. And Davis, you're the kickoff guy.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, as we discussed in our work session prior to this meeting, I think I gave away all of my Ellers.
No, but I caught here, sorry.
Thank you. Bruce Kimmel from Ellers, in response to a request from town staff for an outline of the kinds of things that they would look at related to finding the funds to possibly acquire the CDC parcel, as it's known. This email includes, it's several emails combined in one, but it includes Bruce Kimmel's outline of the topics that Judy and I discussed with him for finding the funds. Include general fund projections from 2017 to 226. Cash flow, looking at fund balance in the general fund, sales taxes over years, projecting based on conservative projections, property tax, other general fund revenues, existing debt payments, post funds, et cetera, to look at how we might gather together funds in the existing town budget to pursue acquisition of that property, and then how those funds might be paid off over time through normal cash flow, through possible sale of property if we acquired it and subdivided into 2 or more pieces, and what that might mean to the town's reserves We have a 33% target for minimum reserves, and what that might mean in terms of doing other projects, because if we came up with a large sum of money, it's obviously gonna put a damper on the ability to do other projects. And so we felt that having a third party come in, do this analysis professionally, come up with numbers, you would be in a much better position if you chose to pursue acquisition to find out and explain to the electorate where those monies would come from without debt, or increase in tax, and you could perhaps move forward on a purchase. So the approximate cost of this is estimated to be between $7,500 and $8,000, with a top set number of 10. That 10 is basically what the manager has flexibility to spend without going through the entire procurement process. And we think that this is a good way to proceed, and a good way to have a third party provide you with what we think is objective information.
Okay, thanks, Davis. And just for those who, some of you were here for the earlier discussion, and many of you were not here for the earlier discussion, but at a past council meeting, Councilor Bernie Grauer had brought up the idea that since we have not been able to move this forward with regard to the CDC parcel and development and the park and just moving forward on it, it's been sitting here for a couple years, he suggested, and he is rather conservative himself, that it might be a good idea to at least consider and have the experts take a look at 2 or 3 options of how we might or might not be able to garner the funds in our, either in our reserves and with partners, open space partners, to see if we could purchase that. We would then subdivide it and zone it and sell off the development parcel that we've talked about all along as being the development portion. So at this point, what we're looking to do is just have a vote about whether or not we take the next step of having Ellers, who has been our financial advisor for quite a while, ever since Scanlon was here, really, have him take a look at at the numbers and give us some options of how we could purchase this and resell it and subdivide it, or whether or not, basically, it's a viable idea for us. So, we're gonna look at buying with cash. These are the for sure things. We're gonna look at purchasing with cash, purchasing with a short-term, not to go to the voters kind of loan, and we are also gonna look at purchasing only half of the parcel, although that has not been necessarily an option to us from the landowner. So, anyway, we've had a very long discussion at 5 o'clock, and at this point in time, if there's anything anybody else has to say, please feel free. Or if there's a motion.
Mayor, I move that the town council direct staff to retain the services of Ellers Public Finance Bruce Kimmel to evaluate town funding related to the purchase of the CDC property.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Got it, thank you. So, before we would take any actual action on this at all, we would bring this report back, we would evaluate it as a council, our finance staff would also look at it, as well as our town manager, and have a serious discussion with the public at that time. So we'll just wait and see what we get back from Bruce Kimmel.
Madam Mayor, we're looking at May 9th to bring this back to you.
Great,
Mr. Kimmel will be at that meeting anyway, and we figured kill a couple birds with one stone.
okay, that sounds great, thank you. There is something that's sticking in the back of my mind. Daniel is here from the high school, and I'm wondering if one of our consent agenda items was something that he wanted to say something about. Daniel, did you have a copy of the agenda?
I do not.
Okay, was there some issue that you wanted to address that's on our agenda?
The reason I'm here is for the color run that we're,
Okay, I think that was on the
Already
consent
approved.
agenda. So, you know what, since you're here, can you give us 1 minute, come up to the microphone, and just give us 1 minute on what that is? Just, I don't want you to waste your time. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Daniel Barnes. I'm a student at Basalt High School, and I'm the president of our National Honor Society this year. This year we're planning on hosting, or we're hoping to host a color run through the town of Basalt, where it's a big race on Sunday, May 7th. A big race with the community where we have a 5K run through Basalt where we throw paint colors at people, and it's a big fun event. It's a benefit for the Aspen Hope Center. We've gotten a couple sponsorships from businesses already. And we're hoping the town can let us host this event. It was a very big success last year and the year before, and we're hoping to continue that.
And Daniel, if somebody wanted to be a partner or help you financially with this fundraiser, who would they contact?
They can contact me or Ben Haig, the secretary of NHS. I don't have Ben's email on hand right now, but my email is daniel7638@rfschools.com.
Okay, that might get you something, you don't know. But anyway, thank
Okay,
you
thank you.
for coming in and for taking the time to give us a heads up on that. Yes, Susan?
Well, you just might want to acknowledge that Daniel received the Betcher Award, and that's pretty significant, so.
I already acknowledged that a whole bunch of times, but yes, Daniel did receive the Betcher Award, and do you want to just say briefly what that is and what that means to you?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
He's so humble.
yeah, the Betcher Scholarship is a scholarship awarded by the Betcher Foundation in Denver. About 1,400 or so students apply from high schools around Colorado, and 42 are awarded this scholarship. It's a full ride to any four-year institution in Colorado.
Yay, okay.
Just one comment, that's a big deal.
It's a
And
huge
But it
deal.
also speaks to our high school. You came out of Basalt High School, and,
That's right.
and not a lot of people in the state won it, so it's incredible.
Yeah,
Thanks,
absolutely.
Daniel.
I'm so thankful for Basalt and all the teachers there and everybody who's helped me get up to this point.
But you're wonderful, but, okay, thank you very much. If there's anything else you want to announce about anything, you can. All
I
right.
think I'm okay.
And Daniel, you're working at Pepino's now, so people can visit you there, right?
Timbo's Pizza.
Oh, Timbo's, sorry, yeah.
Oh, jeez. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, where were we? Okay, let's see. 6B, status of committee appointments. Susan?
Well, the town of Basalt has a lot of different committees and boards, and we've been advertising for some openings that we have on our boards, and really the purpose of this agenda item was really to kind of show you where we were at, and then kind of take your pulse about what you'd like to do as next steps. Would you like to start interviews? Would you like to re-advertise? Would you like to have a subcommittee for some of them? And so we had a list of the committees on one sheet in the status report of who has applied, and then the other information that we provided was just information on each board and who's on the committee today and how many vacancies we have. So when you're also looking at the boards and committees, Mark Krasinski had pointed out that he would like to be considered for post and P&Z. So on your little sheet that looks like this, you can see the list, P&Z, Post, Bach, Green Team, BOZA, Finance Committee, and the BEMC, which is the Basalt Emergency Management Committee.
Thank you, Susan. Just so everybody out there knows, we've got several. She listed all the citizen committees that we have, and almost all of them. So I think we need to take some action on this, because as I said, I have been approached by a couple of people from the public who are asking, I submitted an application for this committee and no one's ever contacted me, and so, anyway, a thought. A subcommittee
I
or?
think we need a subcommittee.
Okay, so you're gonna be on the subcommittee, and you're gonna be on the subcommittee.
I think a subcommittee is a great idea, and as well, I would love, maybe the subcommittee, what is just so valuable is have all of these individuals attended one of these meetings? just because it's very educational, and I highly recommend that. There have been citizens that I have invited to sit on some of these boards, and I've invited them to the actual meetings, and some are very interested and some not so much afterwards. So before we spend the time having a subcommittee and interviewing everyone, I invite outreaching to the individuals that are interested to attend a meeting and provide them the time and date and location, and then have the subcommittee meeting after they have shown their face and attended an entire meeting.
Or what we could do is schedule the subcommittee out long enough to where we know that one of these meetings would have all occurred, because I really don't think we should keep this going any longer than we have to, as we have got people waiting on this. So Susan, what would you recommend as a date to have the subcommittee meet so that all of these subcommittees would have, citizen committees would have met? I know some of them never meet, like BOZA.
Yeah, I mean, both, we're not gonna, yeah.
Okay.
I would say end of May, because we probably aren't gonna have a P and Z meeting next week, so.
Okay, so
maybe
let's
before they amend it,
establish who might be willing to serve, and then maybe you can hook up with them to schedule. Are you willing to serve on that committee?
Yes.
Mark, are you actually willing? I just pointed at you.
Yeah.
Can we get one more?
I will,
Do it.
I will do it.
Okay, is that good enough, do you think?
Yes.
All right, so do we need a motion, do you think, guys, to authorize these guys to?
I just have one more question.
Yes, sir.
Noticing that an individual that I know that has mentioned that they've applied, their name is not on here. If there's some level of confusion between what they
Just why
think
don't you
they've
just
done.
contact me and.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll ask
Yeah.
that person to follow up
Yeah.
with you then. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Is that the follow-up?
No,
Yeah.
different, yeah.
Okay, so anyway, just so everybody out there knows that we probably still have applications that we would accept for these citizen committees, and we would love to have a broad spectrum of people that live in Basalt serve on these, so, thank you.
Yeah, that are interested in being involved, because many of the already existing board members, the committee members, some of them have been there for years and years and years, and we honor that, having the consistency and the commitment to it. So, thanks for having that in mind.
Okay, we have some liquor authority actions, it appears.
We didn't
Mayor.
actually do a
Yeah,
motion.
do we need to do
Mayor,
that?
I move,
I know,
Oh.
we're doing that.
I move that the town council convene as the local liquor authority.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Pam, do you want to introduce this item?
This is a similar thing to what we did last time for Jimbo's. This time we're doing it for Four Dogs Fine Wine and Spirits Liquor Store. They would like to hold tastings throughout the year. They're allowed to by the state. Oh, I'm sorry. Whew, I'm so not used to that. So this is for Four Dogs Wine and Spirits Liquor Store. They'd like to hold tastings. There are certain guidelines that are required by the state for them to follow. They can do it certain hours of the day. They're limited to the number of days and number of times throughout the year they can do this. They forgot to apply the last time they renewed their liquor license, so we're just catching up. I don't have any applicant here this evening. That was my fault for not reminding them to come to the meeting and sending them the agenda. So we had an amended memo appear today with the fire department requesting conditional approval based on some comments that they had down here. The applicant is well aware of these comments, and they will have them complete by May 8th.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions regarding this application for a tastings permit? Or is there?
Mayor, I move that town council approve the tastings application at Four Dogs Wine and Spirits for the dates and times specified in the application.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Just quickly, Pam, could I just ask you just a technical question? Could this be one that's like an administrative kind of approval?
We could do that in the future. It wasn't included in the amendments when we turned it to administrative approvals. So Tom and I will have to make an ordinance, draft an
Okay.
ordinance to bring back
That
to
would be nice
council for
because this is not all that much different than, so.
that. Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
I apologize, but
That's okay.
we didn't have any other way to.
I figured that was the case.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor, I move that the town council adjourn the local liquor authority and reconvene the town council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, second reading of ordinances. The first one is a public hearing and second reading of ordinance 3, an ordinance of the town of Basalt granting approval for minor subdivision to condominiumize the Midland Mall property at 132 Midland Avenue. James, there you are.
Yes,
Hi.
and we've got with us, we've got Michael Feigenbaum
Hi, Michael.
and James Bond,
Hi, James.
applicant group. This is a public hearing and second reading of an application that was submitted by Feigenbaum and Peck on behalf of the property owners, SJ3 LLC. It's a minor subdivision for condominiumization to condominiumize the Midland Mall building at 132 Midland Avenue into 3 commercial condominium units. As was discussed at first reading, it's essentially an application proposing to condo off the Feigenbaum and Peck spaces so that they can purchase those spaces separate from the rest of the building. As staff indicated at first reading, we believe it meets the condominiumization requirements. We've got conditions in the draft ordinance that would require the town attorney and the town planner to do a final review of the condominium map and declarations before they are recorded. So staff would recommend this evening taking applicant comments, taking public comments as it is a public hearing, and then providing council discussion. It should be noted that there have not been amendments to the ordinance since first reading. Michael, do you have any comments?
Yeah, my only comment is we've been working on the condominium plat to update it to reflect some of the comments that James has given us previously, and we expect to have that to him next week for review. Other than that, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the application, but we're satisfied with the ordinance.
Great, okay. If there's no further applicant comments or staff comments, we will open the public hearing at 6:33. Is there anyone in the public who has any comments regarding this application for condominiumization of this location? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and go to council.
I have a question regarding, James, tell us a little bit about the interest level. Is this a new condominiumization?
Not so easy, is it?
No, it's not easy to say that. Good job. Are we going to be inundated with these requests? Is this going to be an interest in, how does this affect the structure of the town?
It doesn't really affect the structure of the town. We've had the ability for commercial buildings to condominiumize so that they could create individual spaces to sell off as individual interests, is what the condominiumization process is. We've had that process in the code for quite some time. We, I guess in 10 or 11 years I've been here, we've had maybe 1 or 2 commercial condominiumizations that are separate.
I would just say that it's kind of consistent with past policies, like in our master plan, where we were trying to encourage, small businesses and small business ownership of property. We've talked over the years whether we should make it administrative, but most times, there is value in kind of the public look and some of the things that the council brought up over the past, so we've never changed our code to make it administrative.
Okay.
And we did talk about this a little bit more on first reading, which normally happens because it's new to us too, but for the sake of small businesses, this is a wonderful thing, because a lot of reasons that businesses can't make it is because they don't own their own property, they don't have any control really of what the rate structure is going to look like for them, for their future. So this is a wonderful thing, and I'm really happy to see this happens. I hope it happens a lot more. So, any other council comments or?
Just to interject,
Yes, sir.
we intend to do it in the whole building.
That's
And we did it for that reason, because my wife has had a business in there. We know the town, and we also know business. And if you want to a steady town, you gotta give them something to grow with. And so that, we intend to do that. It's just gonna take us a couple of years as each individual gets to the point of being able to do it.
Sure.
And, you know, we're not gonna list them to the general public at this point. We intend to offer them to the people on site, not pressure them to do it. If it works for them, fine. If not, we'll hold for a while. And, you know, so that, I think all of that goes towards a happy rental or occupancy situation.
It's a great thing, so. Is anybody prepared with a motion?
Mayor, I move the town council approve ordinance number 3, series of 2017 on second reading.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Done.
Thanks very much.
Congratulations. Thanks.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks, James.
Okay, we did not take public comment because we really didn't do anything except for, ask for a study. Actually, I had announced that we would take public comment when we get the report back and start talking about taking action on it, so we will take public comment at that time.
Doing that, because we passed a bond in 2013 that told you what we wanted to happen on Pan Fork, so can we have some public comment on that?
We're actually past that item and moving on to the other ones, but we will take public comment at the next one.
And there are a lot of people here who would probably like to speak to that.
Okay, well,
That doesn't seem appropriate, that you're spending our tax money on a survey that shouldn't even happen because we voted on this twice. What I was asking for is if we're gonna have public comment on spending $8,000 or $10,000 of our taxpayer money to do yet another study on this personal agenda that you guys have for buying the Pan and Fork parcel. We've already voted on this. 2013, we passed a $5 million bond by a vote of 2-1 that told you, that allowed that to be a developable parcel. We turned down a vote a couple of months ago about this. We've already spoken. The town already owns part of the parcel. Get to work on the part that we already own. We should not be spending any more money. You have a bond, a legal binding bond with the community that we've already voted on, and it seems like that is in direct violation of that bond. It seems like you need to get legal counsel on that before you proceed with spending more of our money, so.
thanks, Stacy.
Yeah.
We've already voted on it, so we will take public comment when it comes back around. We've already voted.
But you didn't offer public comment.
It's consistent with, there are many examples. For example, there's so many studies, the Taka study, there's many studies that we're waiting for to come back, and those do not go to public comment. So this isn't unusual. This is the protocol, and
You guys work for us, and this is our taxpayer money that you're spending, and this seems patently wrong. We've told you twice what we'd like to happen down there. You keep just ignoring the will of the voters.
Thank you, Stacy. We are definitely coming back for public comment. Okay, the next item is public hearing and second reading of Ordinance 4, an ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt appropriating additional sums of money to defray expenses in excess of amounts budgeted for the 2017 budget for the town of Basalt. Underpass. Judy.
Yep, so this is second reading, and just a reminder what we did, we haven't changed anything other than the funding mechanism. During budget discussions, we were gonna go after a COP, and we found a less expensive way to do a short-term financing across the street with our local bank. So it comes in at about $88,000 less than going after COPs. So using the same debt service, same dollar amount, same time frame, just a different funding mechanism.
Okay. Is that all that you have? Okay, this is also a public hearing. We'll open the public hearing at 6:40. Is there anybody in the public that has comment regarding this budget item? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and go to council.
I'm ready to make a motion,
Okay.
somebody.
And then can we get a roll
Mayor?
call as well?
What?
A roll call when you're done?
Okay, a roll call vote on this. Mayor, I move the town council approve ordinance number 4, series of 2017 on second reading.
Is there a second?
second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Oh, roll call. You just said that. Yes.
Mary Tannenbaum is absent. Bernie Grauer,
Yes.
Katie Schwer,
Yes.
Autumn Schindler,
Yes.
Jen Riffle,
Yes.
Mark Hill.
Yes.
Okay, so the next one is a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 5, an ordinance of the town appropriating additional sums of money to defray expenses in excess of amounts budgeted for the 2017 budget for the town of Basalt for the recreation space lease. Judy.
Again, this is the second reading, and so this is the space that Dorothy was able to rent, and it's putting us into a holding pattern until we know what our facilities look like, or if something goes in with Habitat behind the school. So we'll continue to explore options, but their amount is $35,100, and that is to buy us a year to further explore other options.
Thank you. This is also a public hearing, so we will open the public hearing at 6:42. Is there anybody in the public that has any comments regarding this expense? Okay, I will close the public hearing. Council? Discussion?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna.
Well, I had a question for Tom. What's our period of time to get out of this lease agreement?
Well, let's see, with the lease, is the lease in the packet? I know I reviewed it.
It is, it's a year.
Let's see if I can
Not
find
like
it.
30 days or 60 days, it's a whole
Oh,
year?
to get out, I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't understand
Let me
that.
see what it says. The lease only runs till the end of the year.
Okay.
We're not obligated to renew.
Say come July, we find a better opportunity.
We're committed to this lease to the end of the year.
Is that normal?
Yeah.
Okay, because
But
at one point, when we were talking about a different lease, it was mentioned that there's usually an out.
Well, I thought that was a situation where there was an automatic renewal or something like that, was
Okay.
my recollection. But if we want the space on more than a month-to-month basis, the landlord's gonna want a commitment. That's
Sure.
Okay.
pretty standard.
Okay.
But it is only until the end of the year, so it's less than 12 months.
Right. Okay.
I have a question related to that. The expiration date states that it's 1 year, 12 months from the commencement date being April 1st, 2017, and then it states March 31st, 2018 as the expiration date. Are we able to sign a lease that would get us into the next fiscal year? Or as you're describing, this lease should actually terminate December 31,
I thought that
2017?
it was terminated at the end of December, is that right?
No, we,
Oh, okay. Let
it's
me look at it then.
for a year, so we don't have to go back and do, it's multi-year agreements where we have to go back and
it's-
reappropriate.
Okay.
So I was wrong when I said it ended at the end of the year, I thought it did, but it's a 1-year lease expiring April 1,
April 1,
2018.
right.
Okay.
And it's not multi-year unless at some point in time we wanted to do
No.
that, but then that's separate negotiation.
And there's
If-
no auto renewal in this?
No.
Okay.
If we want it after that, we have to give them 90 days advance notice if we want to renew. But also, if we decide we want to get out early and can bring another tenant to the landlord, they have the option of agreeing to that. So that's a possibility also.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve ordinance number 5, series of 2017 on second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
And again, I need roll call just because
Okay,
it's
roll
money,
call,
please. Money, honey.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you, Pam. Okay, the next item is Resolution 12 of 2017, a resolution of the town authorizing borrowing on a line of credit for the purpose of constructing an underpass at Basalt Avenue for the town of Basalt. It's the underpass line of credit, and I assume this is Judy?
Yes, so the resolution is for the line of credit itself. Tom just handed me we need a address correction, which I'll take care of in the morning, but this is for.
Don't worry about it.
So we'll
Technical,
fix
yeah.
we'll fix an address in the morning, but, back to your resolution, so that is, what we need to get the actual, line of credit for Jackie to sign at the bank.
And you, Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
You all, I think this is the revised document that I passed around to
Oh,
everybody here.
okay.
Sorry about that.
Got it. I did see it. Yeah, Tom?
And there could be, we're just getting this, so there could be minor technical amendments.
And I did not do a hard print, Tom, so I need to look
Right.
and see what.
So
I
presume-
didn't, it's like 70-some pages, so I'll check in the
Yeah,
morning.
so presumably that's okay with the council, as long as we don't make any substantive changes to the contracts.
And Judy, just for the, since there's public here and on watching us theoretically, can you just say again why it is we went through this line of credit versus this versus that, and why this is happening now?
Sure, so, the resolution is just, giving us the tool to use the line of credit. During the budget discussions, we had talked about a certificate of participation, sometimes we call them COPs. And when we actually sat down to do that, we had already gone back to Moody's and updated our bond rating, and Standard & Poor's and did the same. But our issuance costs still came in right at $90,000, which is fairly expensive money for a short term. So we started exploring other options, and we came up with using the same debt service, same time frame, but a more favorable way of financing it. So it's just a different mechanism to finance same dollar amount, and this is to the town's portion, because we don't have enough cash on hand to build the underpass.
And it saves us money in issuance costs, right?
About $88,000, so.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, did we have a motion?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So this matures at the end of the year, so we'll have to have another renewal.
Right, and so this is the one where you have multi-year agreements, and so it's like your affordable housing ones. And so we'll talk about it again during budget, but yes, we will redo these every January.
Okay.
Mayor,
Thanks.
I move the town council approve resolution number 12, series of 2017.
Is there a second? Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
It's a resolution.
Okay, we're good on that one. Thanks, Judy. First readings of ordinances. This is a public hearing and first reading of ordinance 7 and ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt granting special review approval for a medical marijuana center at 174 Midland Avenue. James again.
I need to recuse myself.
Okay, can you just state that?
I am recusing myself in consistency of my pattern with this.
Thanks, Jim.
We
Yes, sir.
have- We have with us Norm Clayson here this evening. Norm, would you like to introduce, who else is here with you this evening as well? Or
I think we
you
probably,
it? Okay.
I think everyone knows why I'm here.
This is a public hearing and a first reading of an ordinance to consider an application submitted by Norm and Laura Clayson, actually Neat Things LLC, on behalf of the property owners, Norm and Laura Clayson, for special review for a medical marijuana center on the first floor of the Three Bears building at 174 Midland Avenue. We've got a picture of the Three Bears building up here, as well as the pedestrian alleyway adjacent to the Three Bears building. As background, the council approved code amendments last year to permit retail marijuana stores as a permitted use in the C2 zone district, as well as allowing for medical marijuana centers as a special review use in the C2 zone district. The council also amended the buffer for marijuana stores from parks from 500 feet to 200 feet. So that allowed the applicant to make an application for both medical and retail marijuana licenses. And they're proposing that on the first floor of the building. As you can see up here, there's a floor plan. The medical is proposed in the back portion of the first floor space, and then the retail is proposed in the front portion adjacent to Midland Avenue. Once again, the retail marijuana store is a permitted use, and the medical is a special review use, which is subject to this application. In reviewing the application, staff reviewed it against the standards of Town Code Section 16190, which are the marijuana regulations. And those are listed in the P&Z memo that's attached to your council memo. Staff has included conditions in the draft ordinance requiring that none of the marijuana product or accessories be visible from the adjacent pedestrian way. And we suggested pedestrian way because, once again, it's in the back of the first floor, adjacent to the pedestrian way and not on Midland Avenue. Additional staff requirements that are included as conditions are compliance with the marijuana sign requirements of not more than one sign of 6 square feet, as well as other main requirements of 16190, which are that they cannot have any cultivation or testing on the site, that there is no retail of non-medical foods on the site. There's also requirements related to, once again, the visibility of the product not being able to be seen from the adjacent pedestrian way. The P&Z reviewed the application and felt that the conditions ensured compliance with the marijuana section of the code. So they recommended approval with the conditions that are in the draft ordinance. So this evening, staff would recommend that you take applicant comments, council take public comments as well, because it is a public hearing, and then you could have discussion. If you're comfortable that the conditions ensure compliance with that 16190, you could approve the ordinance on first reading. Staff thinks it should be noted that this is only the land use part of the review. The applicant would have to come back for the licensing part of the review, which would take place at a future meeting. And this is also listed as a condition in the approvals. Norm, do you have additional comments?
None other than the fact that in this 45-day period that we've just been through on this, we've been as responsible as possible to cross every T and dot every I that you have asked us to do and that the ordinance requires us to do. And to my knowledge, we have done that, and there haven't been any complications with it. I've had a number of meetings with Chief Knott about this, because I think it's something that does require a lot of conversations about how it will be set up with cameras, how it will be safe for the public. And I think in the past year, I think you've heard from 32 of my fellow townspeople that support it by petition, and approximately another 30 people that have either spoken here in person or written to you in support of it. I don't think there's really much more for me to say. I just would like you to know that we want to put in a fine business. We don't want it to be a business that is not professional in any way.
Thanks, Norm. Is that it?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else from you, James?
No.
Okay, this is a public hearing. We'll open the public hearing at 6:55. Are there people in the public that have any comments regarding this application? Okay, front, then not front. Come on up. Yeah, he needs a mic for sure. Could you just state your name for the record?
Good evening, Council. My name is Jeremy Kentz. I'm 38. I just recently purchased a coffee shop here in Basalt. I would love to see marijuana, retail marijuana and medical marijuana come to Basalt. I think it's going to be great for our Basalt economy, our downtown vitality. And I'd like to see Basalt continue to grow. I still believe that this is one of the most amazing places in the valley. We've got a lot of opportunity here, and I'd like to see this move forward.
Thanks, Jeremy. Rick?
Yeah, Rick Stevens. Yeah, I was on council when this discussion started a long time ago, and it started with medical and it's advanced to recreational. We've been through all kinds of work sessions and discussions about how many should be located in Basalt and where they should be located in Basalt, and we've redefined boundaries and setbacks and limits and everything. I'm here to speak more, though, about I think we've come a long way in the last 5 years in terms of education. I do a lot of work with a lot of young people. And initially, I was concerned about the issues with marijuana getting into the younger generation's hands, not younger generation, but younger children's hands. And I think that this particular person understands that, and in fact has expressed the concerns that he had for the issues around our youth getting into this stuff a little too early on. It's more about his character for me than it is legalizing marijuana or having a retail operation. This gentleman's proved over 5 decades that he's a solid citizen and he can be trusted, and when he says that he's going to do something right, it's going to be done right. So I really urge you to approve this and move it on down the line, because you've got a lot of other issues you need to deal with coming up. So this one should be pretty brief, and I hope you do approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and go to council for discussion, questions, comments.
Mayor, I move the town council approve ordinance number 7, series of 2017, on first reading and continue and set the public hearing and second reading for May 9th.
Second? Okay. I did just have a question, James. I was a little bit confused that the medical and the retail are in the same application, even though the retail is just a permitted use and the medical is a special review. Are the conditions going to be exactly the same? Is that why they're all mixed in one?
No, not necessarily. It's mixed in one to show what the concept for the building is.
Oh, the land use only, got it.
What council is reviewing is the land use for the special review for the medical marijuana
Okay.
only.
Got
But the
it.
conditions will be similar on the license
Okay, super.
for retail.
Okay, that was my only comment. So I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, James, I can get it.
Smack right on the corner there. That's probably where the baseball
That's when I hit my head really bad because I couldn't see. Hiking in the desert under rocks, you know?
Oh.
Boom, knocked me on my.
Bong, did you say bong? There,
Is that
that gave it,
appropriate?
that gave it
You
away.
can say that now. Jeez. Never had a bomb.
Try to knock the wind out of it.
Yeah, that's okay. The iPad and the baseball cap, they both saved me.
The applicant here.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hello. How's everything? Yes, he does. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read this item. It's public hearing and first reading of Ordinance 8, an ordinance of the town extending and increasing the corporate limits of the town of Basalt, State of Colorado, mini storage expansion pursuant to the provisions of the Colorado Municipal Annexation Act by annexing to the town land contiguous to and not embraced within the present limits of the town of Basalt, known as the Basalt mini storage property and portions of Southside Drive and Few Lane, granting approval of initial zoning for the property and approving a preliminary final subdivision application and final site plan review to construct 81,000 square feet of mini storage. James again.
Yes, thank you. We have Clay Crossland here this evening, representing David Co. Would you like to introduce the rest of your team?
Yes, I have with me Jeff Orsolak with Warner Design and Planning, and Stephanie from Stoker's Engineering, and Julia Marshall from Mount Bailey Enterprises, Landscape Engineering.
Thank
Got
you.
it.
Got it.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing, and it's a first reading of an ordinance that is considering an application submitted by David Co. LLC. And as the mayor indicated, it's for annexation final site plan, preliminary and final subdivision, and it's to construct approximately 81,000 square feet of additional mini storage space. As background, the applicant received sketch plan approval last year. The review requires 2 rounds of review by the P&Z and the town council, and this would be the second round of review. And once again, it's for 81,000 of new mini storage space in 4 buildings. You can see it on the site plan above Tom here. And you get 4 buildings of about 20,000 square feet. The applicant is also proposing to annex a portion of Southside Drive and a portion of Few Lane, which are cleanups that staff had asked the applicant to do in conjunction with the application. The property subject to the application is about 2 acres of land, and it's just south of the existing mini storage in this location. It's vacant land, and it's in the town's urban growth boundary. It's designated as light industrial, as you can see on the future land use map in this area. I'll let the applicant go into more detail on what their proposal is, but staff would like to briefly go over the discussion items that we identified. They're on the wall, and you also have them in your staff memo. The first one is consistency with the master plan. As I indicated, it's in the urban growth boundary and designated as light industrial. The P&Z and the council at the sketch plan level thought it was compatible and consistent with this master plan. Consistency with neighborhood character. Once again, the P&Z and council felt that it was generally consistent with the neighborhood character at the sketch plan, as long as there were revisions made to the architecture as well as the landscaping. And the applicant will go into more detail on the changes that they've made. Compliance with the industrial zone district. The applicant is proposing to rezone the property upon annexation to the industrial zone district in the town. Staff has done a review of the project against the industrial zone district use and dimensional requirements, and it's consistent with the industrial zone district. Vehicular access, the applicant has proposed to access the site from 2 private roads off of Southside Drive. This is Southside Drive going down towards the high school, and they proposed 2 private access roads. Additionally, they've got access through the existing mini storage to connect up to the proposed plan. There's no change in the access from the sketch plan, but it should be noted that the engineers did come to an agreement on the turning radiuses that come off of Southside Drive. That was a discussion item as part of the sketch plan. Affordable housing, another discussion topic. The applicant originally, as part of the sketch plan application, felt that they would be generating a half of an employee with the addition of the mini storage. But they expressed in that initial application that stuff like accounting and maintenance would be outsourced. Staff felt at the sketch plan level that those activities should be included and should be mitigated for as employee generation. So it was ultimately agreed upon as part of the sketch plan approvals that the applicant be required to mitigate for 2 employees with the addition. So the applicant proposed to pay cash in lieu of 2 employees, and that is still a requirement in the draft ordinance that you have in front of you. So there's no change from the sketch plan as part of that in the conditions. Traffic mitigation, the council reviewed the traffic report as part of the Stotts Mill review that was prepared by SGM. The traffic report included the proposed mini storage expansion as part of the 20-year build-out. Recommended laneage improvements as well as the mini roundabout at Basalt Avenue and Cody Lane. And there was a condition that's included in your draft ordinance that would require the applicant to make a fair share contribution to those improvements as part of their proposal based on traffic generation of their project. Additionally, there's a requirement that they pay a transportation impact fee that has been assessed on annexation projects going back quite a ways. The applicant has provided a letter that was sent out to the council yesterday. There's also a copy at your tables. They're requesting a reduction in that fee be considered. Staff, since we received the written discussion on it yesterday, would suggest that we will analyze it and come back with a recommendation as part of the second reading review, if we get that far there. As far as other topics, there is pedestrian access. As part of the sketch plan application, there was discussion about this property right here and adding a sidewalk adjacent to the FU Lane access here. You'll note that there's a trail adjacent to Southside Drive that goes all the way from the high school and Rio Grande Trail down to this area, but it doesn't continue on the south side of FU Lane. And instead, right now, people wanting to go from the Rio Grande Trail have to cross FU Lane and then cross back over Basalt Avenue. There was a condition as part of the sketch plan that the applicant be required to construct a trail adjacent to FU Lane, and the applicant has continued to include that, and it's part of the draft ordinance. We did change the condition slightly from the sketch plan to require the applicant to provide us the temporary easement to do that in advance of the mini storage being constructed, in the case that the town wants to either build that or require another developer to build that prior to the mini storage construction. There's architectural revisions. It was a condition in the sketch plan that required the applicant to adjust the architecture to make it more pleasing, and that was one of the conditions to make it more compatible. And the applicant has made some adjustments. They'll go over those architectural adjustments with the council. There was also a condition related to requiring additional landscaping on the east side of the project to help screen it from Southside Drive in the residential area, as well as a possible berm. The applicant has added a berm as well as additional landscaping, and they'll go over that plan as part of the review. So this evening, staff would recommend hearing comments from the applicant in a presentation, asking any questions that the council may have of staff or the applicant, and then taking public comment. And ultimately, the P&Z recommended approval with the conditions that you have in your draft ordinance. Clay, would you guys like to provide some comments?
Sure. Thanks, James. As James indicated, I'm Clay Crossland, managing partner for David Co. LLC. And I think staff has accurately described the status of this application. To summarize from our point of view, I would just like to point out and emphasize again that our application has been found to be consistent with the master plan, consistent with the neighborhood character, and compliance with the industrial zone dimensional requirements, found to have a traffic impact well below CDOT's requirements, satisfied the affordable housing requirements, satisfied Basalt sanitation and fire district requirements, committed to an acceptable phasing and vesting rights schedule, agreed to a number of building and traffic impact fees to include a 2% real estate transfer tax, and to dedicate water rights at a home supply ditch. And we have agreed to annex the rest of Southside Drive at the town's request. In addition, we have agreed to grant a pedestrian easement, as James pointed out, and construct a path on a separate parcel adjacent to Few Lane. And we did that at the town's request. The only two real issues that were expressed by the town from our point of view during the sketch plan review were, as James pointed out, a desire that the project provide more landscaping to include a potential berm, and two, provide more detailed architectural designs and intentions that incorporates the barn theme. The only one real issue that we have, as James pointed out, is the south side transportation fee calculated for the industrial zoning. And yesterday I submitted a letter to the town requesting staff to consider, well, my letter actually gave the justification as to why I thought that fee should be reduced. And we are asking that staff consider that and that we take that issue up at the next hearing. So at this time, our presentation is going to be, Jeff Orsolak is going to review our sketch plan application just briefly and then bring us forward to how we have made the modifications on the design and landscaping. So Jeff?
Thanks, Clay. And hey, guys, thanks for your time. Just to start to orient us, sorry, I'm trying to go behind James and around to the mic here. No, that's okay. South side, this is south side. This is where the existing mini storage is. This is the parcel that we're talking about here. Oops. This red area is the zone where we're going to put our mini storage buildings, our 4 buildings. And then this shows what we're annexing, which is this parcel here for the 4 buildings. And then this is the piece of property which is going to clean up that south side drive annexation, which hasn't happened yet, but we want to do it at this step. And then right here is where that sidewalk or path is that James was discussing. So this is the site plan as it is now. We heard you, and we made some adjustments to the design and to the site. I believe it's kind of fourfold. One, we started to add a berming here on the front, and these berms are about 7 feet tall each, and they kind of pile up collectively along the way. And we would phase those in front of the building, so the berms would happen a building ahead of the building. So you would not just start with 1 berm, 1 building, you do 2 berms, 1 building, and you move forward from there. Landscaping, we've created a buffer zone of landscaping at the buildings. And then the next thing we can talk about is the design and how we adjusted the design to lower its scale and kind of create a more congruous building to go with the neighborhood. So this is where we were. We had kind of a more modern building. We were 24 feet here, 33 here. And so we took that and we said, okay, well, how do we make that feel kind of more barn-like? What can we do to kind of scale it more appropriately for the community? This is where we've ended up. So we've kind of used more traditional forms, added some false windows and doors to kind of create that barn feel, articulated the eave like you would normally see in a barn. We've also lowered this eave down by about 2 feet 4 inches or so. The height of this building is, the ridge line is actually lower than the ridge line in most of the houses across the street. So to kind of give you an idea of scale and height. Once again, this is where we were. Here are these 4 buildings from the Grange property. As we talked about the first time, we're doing all of our loading, all of our traffic on this side, so that less impact to the neighborhood, creates that buffer between the cows and the houses, which is something that Billy really likes to see, and just keeps that impact lower for the community. Once again, this is where we were, and this is where we are now. This is that collection of 7-foot berms. Eave has come down, more traditional style buildings, big kind of barn doors, and this transom up here. This is directly across the street, standing kind of on South Side Drive, looking at these spaces. You can start to see how that 7-foot berm and that landscaping starts to create that buffer. This is looking down South Side. Here are the 4 buildings, tearing down. It's amazing. When you're biking up it, you realize it's a little steeper than when you're driving up it. There's some steps in here, and so these buildings are just kind of tracking down. This is once again looking from South Side. We've seen that one already. And then this is the landscape. Julia is here to kind of talk a little bit more about the landscape and kind of describe what we're up to.
Julia, can you come on up? Mike.
Hi, I'm Julia Marshall. I'm landscape architect for this project. And let's see. Our approach to the landscaping was to, because these buildings have a certain scale, was to actually integrate evergreens at each kind of moment to break up the scale of the buildings, as well as then to have deciduous trees work in between those plantings of the evergreen trees. And all of the trees that we have are, grew to a substantial size so that they will, not when they're first installed, but when they grow up, will exceed the height of these buildings. So like you have cottonwoods here, ponderosa in here, you have the accolade elm in this category, and then we also have the century maple trees. The berms, you can see the area of disturbance here for the berms. And we will be seeding that with the Pickens County dryland mix. So it'll look essentially like a pasture with berms until there's like something done with this parcel. Do you have any questions?
And I think the last thing to kind of point out is fencing. One of the things we've been able to do, since we're loading all from this side, it really allows us to kind of eliminate fencing as a visual impact. And so what happens is we only start to kind of locate fences in between each one of these buildings, as opposed to having to run a fence all the way down this like you normally see in a mini storage kind of condition. So that just kind of creates a more aesthetically pleasing, approachable space visually from the street. So
I think that's it.
yeah, there we go.
Nobody said the end. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation and this information. I have to say, it is better looking than it was before.
Well, understand before, we just basically tried to show the mass.
Sure.
We didn't mean for that
It was a
to be
sketch plan.
architectural intention.
You hadn't painted it yet.
Right.
Okay, anything else from the applicant or representatives? Okay, this is a public hearing. We will open the public hearing. It is a public hearing, right?
Mhm.
Yes. At 7:20.
Bless you.
There aren't any publics out there, so we'll close the public hearing. Council, questions, thoughts?
Can I ask a question?
Jen?
Julia, did I hear you correctly say that there was going to be cottonwood?
There are 3 cottonwoods located on the end of the building right in that area.
Okay. First, why, you're a landscape architect, and maybe you can educate me on a side note. I was under the impression that cottonwoods were outlawed and you weren't allowed to plant them in the state of Colorado. That's false?
Yeah, they're cottonless now. They're hybridized, so they're
Oh, they're
cottonless.
hybridized.
Yes, so
Got
they don't generate cotton anymore.
Okay, great, thanks for clarifying.
Yes, but they haven't outlawed them because we wouldn't have hardly any trees up valley.
Right, right.
Kinda
that's
need
what I was-
those, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Anybody else? I just have a couple of comments. They're not really specifically, well, I'll just say. First of all, I just want to say to the council, because a lot of the people on this council are new, but just for your information, this is an annexation, which means it is a contract between the town and the developer, versus a approval that occurs in the town. So I'm not trying to get at anything, but I just want you to know that during an annexation process, there aren't really any rules. You are creating a contract, and you just both have to agree to sign the contract. There are no uses by right, except for the fact that the use by right is that the parcel is currently in Pickens County. And the zoning that exists on that parcel right now is AR10, which is agricultural residential, 1 house per 10 acres. So I'm having this conversation with you because I had this conversation with a person who lives in Southside today. And so I was running over to James, trying to figure out what the comp plan said, because after hearing that zoning, that took me aback. So just so you know that. So what that kind of tells me is the applicant is very clearly in compliance with our comp plan, but it tells me that when we are redoing this comp plan, we need to take a close look at this stuff, because generally speaking, in my limited amount of time in college spent on master planning, is that what you don't want is agriculture and cows directly abutted by industrial. You want to like zone out, right? It's dense in the middle and gets less and less and less, so you end up with something like 1 house per 10 acres. So this is not the applicant's problem. This is something that we did. It's right there, but I just want to bring it to your attention that we need to pay close attention when we're comp planning. Also, I had a question about the RETA and how that actually applies here. I mean, you're not selling the units,
I
right?
think it's for future sales,
Oh, for,
future
okay.
sales.
But right now, will one person own it and rent the,
Well, the
Units?
entity will own it,
okay,
yeah,
an entity,
an entity,
an
yeah.
organization, okay. So really, the RETA application would apply if there was a large sale of the entire
Right.
project probably, right? Okay, just clarifying that. And that's all I really had. I don't have any other questions. Bernie?
Well, I'll just note, this is in our urban growth boundary. It does provide a service that's quite desirable in any urban environment, namely temporary storage. And I think it has been designed to coexist well with its residential face and its face on the agricultural land. So I think it's in compliance with all our requests and requirements.
That's been made clear. And the one thing I didn't think of was, I was thinking this is up right against agricultural, but the fact that that is gonna screen makes a lot of sense to me, the residential from, I mean, if I move out there, I'm thinking I wanna be by the cows, but I can see where people would move out there and be surprised that there were cows there, so, good plan, yeah.
And remember, Billy Grange is high on this type of use next
That's
to
what
his
you
cabin.
said.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have any complaints or,
No,
Right.
he's an advocate, yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move the town council approve ordinance number 7 on first reading and continue and set public hearing and second reading for May 9th.
Second.
I have additional questions.
Okay,
Okay.
They're quick. So, in the traffic mitigation that James discussed, you said that there would be a contribution towards the roundabout. And I missed the last Stotts Mill meeting, but I know that the meeting prior to that, there was a hubbub about that roundabout actually being more of a hindrance than a need. Is that still the situation? And if that is the situation, will the applicant apply funds to a different
So,
traffic mitigation?
sure, that's a good question. At the last Stotts Mill meeting, the traffic engineer, Lee Barger with SGM, provided a revised letter that indicated that he felt that the roundabout would be helpful, and also the laneage changes that are happening with the pedestrian underpass right now would be helpful, and indicated that those would be appropriate improvements for the 20-year build-out. That said, we've got language in the conditions that are in the draft ordinance, basically allowing the town to use it on other vehicular improvements for Southside traffic if we decide there's a better improvement out there.
Okay,
And
so
we
ultimately,
recognize that.
okay, so ultimately we'll be getting some funds whether the roundabout occurs or not to mitigate traffic out there.
Yeah, and it's based on the cost of the mini roundabout is
Okay,
how it's divvied
got
out.
it, okay.
So.
And then just really quick, this is pretty minor, but the sidewalk extension, so we're getting the easement, the town will get the easement, and construction would be a financial obligation of the applicant?
It would be at the time that they're constructing the first building in the mini storage, but we've changed the conditions in sketch plan so that the town, if we wanted to build it before they were ready, or if we had another developer that we wanted to require build it, that we could before they're ready to do their project.
Okay. Thank you. That covers my questions.
Mayor, before I forget, I misspoke. It's ordinance number 8.
Oh, right. We didn't flip over, did we?
Sorry.
Second that one.
So we have two motions. And do we need to do anything with that motion and second that was for the wrong ordinance?
I said 7. I just,
That's all we need to do? All right. Excellent. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
Well, thank you very much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks.
And I would repeat, I just, add that the industrial designation on that property was very deliberate, because we had talked to Billy, and he didn't want to have, he was very particular, he didn't want lots of people and the conflicts of people and dogs getting in with his cows. And the town really wanted to have this work, and this housing and work balance, and so we were looking for areas to have industrial. And so when we actually added the conservation easement on Billy Grange's property, we were looking for other areas that we could have employment-based and other industrial uses, so.
You could argue this all day, but, I think that some, like, for instance, the person that called me today
Yeah.
didn't think it was a great idea to have industrial right by residential, so.
I was just,
you could go on all the, it's done.
Right.
It's over.
I just wanted
We
you
did
to know
it.
that there was some thought behind.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned, thank you. And we don't have an executive session or anything.
Nope. Nothing.
We'll come up with